Okay, so we're on page Nun Ches. We're approaching the conclusion of the Maimer. So last week in the last class, he continued and he explained that based on everything we learned before, that the Shem Elikim, that everything comes from the Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei. The Shem Elikim is only the sort of delivery system, and even the Shem Elikim also originates from the same source. It's just that it's a way of allowing the light of Neim Yud Kei Vav Kei to operate within creation in a way that the creation can receive it. Just like the Rebbe who packages the ideas just so that the student could receive it. So it comes out that everything, that similarly the delivery systems in the physical world, that Kechavim, Mazolas, Malachim, even higher, whatever the delivery systems are, in how the Eibishter sends a person's needs down to this world. So, but it's all understood that it's all the Neim Yud Kei Vav Kei. It's just the Eibishter operating through that, because and it's really all him. It's just him sending down the creative energy on him, expressing himself as the into the packaging, but the packaging is also him. So therefore he says that, but even from the perception that there is a delivery system, even from that angle, we would understand that the delivery system is nothing more than a tool. You wouldn't, even if you looked at the delivery system as a thing for itself, you wouldn't think that the delivery system is the thing that's making it happen. We understand that it's only a tool. So just like the pasuk says, "I spur guards and halachaytzibay," would we, glorify would the axe consider itself better than the woodsman, the person using the axe? Look what I did. All you did was swing. I did all the chopping and the cutting, and so obviously we understand that that's nonsense, because it's only a tool, and so much so that when a person looks at a building, nobody says, "Wow, look what the hammer accomplished," or nobody's going to say, "Wow, it must have been a really talented hammer," because we understand that it was just a tool. So he says that that's the idea, that how you relate to all of the systems and all the processes, even the things that you have to do in order to have parnasa. When a person realizes that everything, that all the things in which the delivery is packaged in, even in the business and the things that he's required to do, that really it's all from the Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei, and it's just passing through the Shem Elikim. But the Shem Elikim and the Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei, it's all one. It's not separate departments. So then, it's how could it be that the world and the rules of the world, the things that are just all come from Shem Havaya, it's just the packaging system. How could it wouldn't make sense that would be an obstacle to learning Torah and doing mitzvahs and doing the things that you need to do, if it's all coming from Hashem and it's all for the purpose of revealing that truth, doing those things that you have to do. So he says, so really, if a person experiences his business responsibilities as an obstacle to his learning and his davening, it's not because they are for real. It's because of his perception. If he perceives the business as the thing that's bringing him to hashpah, then it could create a conflict between his learning and his davening. If he just sees if everything is just from the Eibishter, and the business is just, you want me to do it this way, fine, I'll do it this way, but I know it's all coming from you. You just want me to be part of the process of the delivery system. So fine. So I'm not invested in that. I'm invested in you. I'm invested in you, then you will discover that there really is no obstacle, there really is no, it's a challenge, it's an assignment, as we explained earlier. It's not something that comes easily. But really the challenge is about your perception. And when you see through the challenge, then the challenge goes away. That's how challenges work. It's only if it's blocking your ability to see what's really going on. If you can see what's really going on, so it's not really, you pass the test, so to speak. Once you, even if you may have to technically do certain steps, but once you see through the cover up, then you're pretty much there. So he explained that this is, but Chas v'Shalom, if a person separates between the two, and then he looks at the things that are the delivery systems. He looks at that's the source of his hashpah gashmis. That's what gives him life. So that's like the Goyim who say Azav Hashem es haaretz, that Hashem abandoned the earth, left the earth. So they even they believe he created it. They believe that he put systems into place. But now he put the systems into place. Now the systems do the work. He's not directly involved anymore. So that's the source of Avodah Zarah. The source of idol worship is that belief that, of course there's a creator, not, he's the big guy, he's big, he's on top of everybody, but after him, now there's he did his...
Ministers.
Now there's a system in place, and you have to work with the system. So he says, about halfway down the page, maybe a line or two after halfway. With this will be understood the statement of our sages that the Jewish people who live in Chutz La'aretz, outside of Eretz Yisrael, they are described as idol worshippers in purity. They were. What's idol worship is in purity. First of all, it doesn't make any sense because most Jews are in Gola, certainly starting from that by the time of the Gemara already. Most Jews were outside of Eretz Yisrael. How could like the Gemara make a blanket statement about most Jews that they're idol worshippers? God forbid. But the idea is the Shem Shabbat is begashmis. How did they actually practice Avodah Zarah in the physical sense? What did they actually do? What did idol worship involve? One of the main things was bowing one's head and kneeling, bowing down was a big part of in front of the stars, the constellations, like to the Shemesh V'Layarech, like to the sun, like to the moon, etc. Because he considers them, he values them as something important. He considers them as that they are a thing unto themselves, they're a force unto themselves, that from there the hashpah comes down to him from there. As it says, we make it for his shamash, we make it get a shirach. So he's not making it up. There's actually, the Torah has a source. The Torah indicates that yes, there is some hashpah that affects the growth. Certain things their growth is dependent on the sun, and certain things their growth is dependent on the moon. Ukanal, as we mentioned before, the parentheses that these are intermediaries. However, they're only like the axe in the hand of the wood chopper. The problem is that he's considering them as something, a thing for itself, as if they themselves are being mashpia with their own power, that they have any power and they have any decision-making power, chas v'sholem, etc. She says, so the same thing is Avodah Zarah beruchnius. Not actually bowing down to the sun and the moon. The reason why the people did it those days because they thought that if you bow down to the sun will deliver more goodies. They will treat you better than if you don't bow down to the sun, right? So you can make it in Avodah Zarah Baruch. Similarly, is the idea of idol worship in the spiritual sense. When he gives weight and he gives them importance to the physical things that are come down to through by way of the sun and the moon and the other stars and constellations. And he thinks that they're the source of his parnas. So why is this similar to the person who bows down in Gashmis? Because because he bows his head, he bends his head. So the idea is that I in his mind, he's bowing his head. He's accepting the fact that they have power over me.
It's like thinking that when the weather is nice, there's more people coming into the store because there are more people outside. So you think if the sun is going to come out,
right,
then I'm going to have more business.
Right, but the sun doesn't decide that.
Right, I'm saying it's like
right.
bowing to the sun. Ruchnis.
Okay, so obviously the connection was much more obvious when you lived in an agricultural society. Yeah. So the connection
you needed the rain, you needed the...
Right, between all of the, the things that cover the weather and so on. The same thing is, in the spiritual sense, he bends and he negates his, he submits his intellect to the things that flow through the heavenly bodies and heavenly forces. So what does that mean? That he submits and he bows his head, his seichel, that he puts his mind and heart into the business, into the physical aspects of the business, and he worrying about his parnasa, because there are people who worry about their parnasa because they're just worried. But sometimes that part of worrying is a strategy to be more effective, right? You feel like if I'm not going to worry, there's worry like a helpless kind of worry, but then there's the worry of a person who's very involved in. If I don't worry about details, it's not going to, things are not going to, if I don't worry about making sure that the work is not slacking off. So worrying is a part of running a business, not just stop worrying. And he tries to come up with all kinds of strategies in his dealings in business, in Masamat, and he thinks that through his different strategies, that's how he's going to make a profit. He forgets about the Eibishter, that he's the one that gives him the power to achieve success, as we mentioned previously. If God forbid he loses money, he's not going to think of the Eibishter that did this to him because of his own deeds that caused that he should have this loss. That Eibishter only gives you back what you have coming to you. He'll think, I picked the wrong location, I picked the wrong thing, I did the wrong, that he did this and this, that's why he lost out. But if he would have done it in a different way, then I would have made money. If I would have set it up the other way, if I would have done the deal that way, if I would have used this connection, whatever it is. If that is the case, then he is giving importance to the dealings, the business dealings, the physical business dealings. He's making them, that's the main thing. And and he puts his intellect, his mind into it, Eichel Malasik, how and what to be involved, to deal, the Kamatachbulas, with all kinds of sketchy strategies. And day and night, he will not allow his mind and his thoughts to rest from thinking about the business. The Yatid, the Yibalbul Esi Beis HaTfilah, and this will also distract him and confuse him during the time of davening. The Yimna Esi Miterev Avodachu, and it will prevent him from being involved from Torah study and serving God in davening. But this is a worshipping of idols, like actual idol worship. He's worshipping something else because he thinks that's where his parnasa comes from. Amru, it's about this that they said, it's about this mindset that they said that the Jewish people in Chutz La'aretz are idol worshippers in purity, meaning that they don't, God forbid, do actual idol worship, but still there's an aspect of that. That's to do with being overly involved in the business and with different strategies, trying to come up with different tricks and workarounds and angles. That he thinks that he thinks that his strength and the power of his hand is what granted him success, and he forgets about godliness. So what's so great about why Taira? He says because the reason why it's called impurity is because there is a limud schos on them. What's the limud schos? Masheheim b'chutz la'aretz. The fact that they are outside of Eretz Yisrael. The b'chutz la'aretz nimshach ha'era the islapshus levush ha'asiyah shul levush gas ma'ote. Because in chutz la'aretz the light of the divine hashpah becomes dressed up in the garments of asiyah. And the garments of asiyah is a very coarse garment, very much harder to see that it comes coming from a higher source. As explained elsewhere, it covers up and conceals to the point that one cannot see the spirituality of the light. That there's a divine energy that's being channeled to him. All he sees is the very material, physical, external packaging. But still in all, he's still called an Eved Avodah Zarah. Maybe a Taira, maybe a Limud Schos on him, but an Eved Avodah Zarah he remains. Because you need to know because in truth, you need to know that in truth, it is not covering up and concealing at all. And actually, now he is in the parentheses. Actually, the levush hagast asiyah miskashim ha'erat she'ena nira v'nigla ruchnis erchule. It's just that through this coarse garment of asiyah, the light itself becomes so, it takes on such a material form to the point that it's not seen and revealed the spirituality of the light. But the truth is that even the most coarse garments, they do not truly cover up. To the contrary, they bring the light and the life force, as explained earlier. Except that the highest energy comes in the way of a physical energy. It seems more materialistic, but that doesn't, it's not really a cover-up. So here in this Maimon he doesn't make the distinction, but there's elsewhere he explains at length. Here he spoke about the Rebbe using a mashal, that sometimes there's bringing that, explaining the idea on a simpler level, and sometimes he has to bring it down even further and use a mashal. elsewhere he talks about that there's a difference between using a mashal and even lower than a mashal, something called a chida, a riddle, where I can't even explain it to you, but I could sort of to give the person something that which is completely unrelated. I'm not even like explaining it to you. It's like a riddle, but when you figure out the riddle, that will help you now open your mind to the idea that's behind it. So like so there he explains that sometimes there's cover, but again, when you get the riddle, then you actually it can sometimes get a deeper understanding than if you just got it through an example, a story, an analogy. So you're further removed from it in a way, and you have to this, but in a sense, you could also get you closer. So yes, there's a greater cover-up, but if you see through that cover-up, then you're...
It's also coming from you. The riddle is like...
Well, if you buy into the cover-up, well, okay, but you have your own internal cover-up, you have your body and animal soul that's...
the riddle seems like it's you run into something that you don't have an explanation to, and that's the riddle, and then it's yours. When you unpack it, it's more like a story given to you.
It's
coming from you. It's more covered.
Right.
It's more
but
yours.
in a sense, it's much more disconnected from the message.
Yeah.
So it's, in other words, it's like it has nothing to do. It's not like I'm not even explaining. But okay, so he says so back to what he was saying. That was just a parenthetical comment that no matter how coarse the garments are, you're still supposed to see. The truth is that it's only yes, there's more of a cover up, but it's only to bring out the light, to bring out the truth. So he says. So you need to know that it really doesn't cover up. You have to actually sense and feel the godliness. You literally have to feel, you have to sense, even when you're actually doing physical work, even in Asiyah, whether you're engaged in business, even in this lowly world, you have to actually sense that this is all godliness. It's just this is the packaging. And this, all of this, that he does bow his head to the things that come by way of the natural forces, Hasibul Zehu, the real reason, the real cause behind it all, it all starts from separating the Shem Elikim from the Shem Havaya, that he thinks that the Shem Elikim is a real cover-up, Chas v'Shalom, that there's a difference between creator and creation, the creative force and the concealing force. The concealing force is really there to cover up. And Chassidus explains that it could start in a very subtle way. That people who believed that they were great Torah scholars and great Kabbalists, and the way they understood, the way they understood Kabbalistically was that, God made a cover-up. In order to make a world in which you have free will, in order to make this, that he did make a cover-up, and the cover-up is real, and that's, so this explains that that's, even though it's a very subtle point, but that's where it all starts. And then, so the next step is, if you think that they're separate, so therefore, as it consequently thinks that the intermediaries who are sourced in the Shem Elikim, it is through them that everything actually is created, everything actually happens. Yes, he believes that the creative energy begins in the name Yud Kei Vav Kei, but once it's been filtered down through these lower forces, so now it's happening through those lower forces. And therefore he thinks of them and gives them the importance of something significant, and therefore he bows to them, when really they are nothing in and of themselves. And so too he gives importance to the things that are nishpa from those forces, as they are in this world already, the other means and tools that you're supposed to use, and he makes them into the main thing, and he bows his head and his intellect to them. That is the inyan of idol worship in purity. Not that he's questioning the existence of God, not that he's questioning that God runs the show, and not that he's the creator, he runs everything, except he put a system in place, you got to work with the system. The system is real. Not that the system is just him delivering to you so that you should realize that it's all him, so that in a way that you could be able to relate, so you should realize that it's all him, not the system. But when he unifies, right, that's what we started, that we adat to Hashem Elokim, that it's all one. When he does this yichud, sounds very mystical, Kabbalistic, making yichudim. This is making yichudim. You go into the business and you feel that it's all elokus. That's the real yichudim. And he unifies the name of Havaya and Elikim, and that he knows the truth, as we said before, the Shem Elikim and the Master al Shem Havaya, that the name Elikim does not conceal the Shem Havaya. Kim Adrab, except rather to the contrary, maybe to the contrary, its whole purpose is to bring the Gilu Shem Havaya, but to bring it lower and lower to the recipient, that you could take it. But when you will unpack it, when you'll see through, when you'll take it in and expand your understanding and consciousness, whatever the process is, 40 years, whatever that process is that you're going to go through. But the point is that it's there in order to bring the name Elikim just down to the lowest level. The name Havaya except down to the lowest levels. So consequently, he knows that all of the intermediaries, he knows very well that all the intermediaries, all the means are only like an axe in the hand of the woodcut chopper. It's only tools to bring down the godly flow. And therefore he doesn't think of them, he doesn't consider them of having the significance and importance of anything. It's not a thing. It's not a thing. And similarly, he does not think about the physical means and tools as something of importance at all. It's not a primary. The main thing is the godliness, because he is actually your very life force. What keeps you alive? He is your life, and he's the one who gives you the strength to accomplish, to achieve success in terms of your material and physical needs. Therefore, even when he's involved in business with physical objects, because he's completely attached and connected to godliness. That's what he's connected to. This is just the means. The Azavim Testament is nice to say, Ulispal Kedeboy, Velasik Beteda, so his relationship, even though he's doing these physical things, his whole connection with his whole relationship is with God. Just like we understand that in human relationships, say husband and wife, right? Or so if the wife is cooking dinner for the husband, so does she think of herself as someone who's a dinner cooker, or does she think of herself as a wife? One of the things is the
Don't you
wife.
say thank you?
One of the things that I do is make
Clear the
dinner,
table.
is make supper for my husband. But I'm not a, I'm not a. This, this is just the way that we use to. These are the things that we use to build our connection. But I'm not. I didn't become. I didn't sign up to be a kitchen worker. I'm not. That's not what I do. I'm not. A mother is not a diaper changer. She cares for her child. The main thing is the connection. The main thing is the relationship. So the same thing when he says to be Davik and Elikus, we think, oh, it sounds so. That sounds mystical. Dvekas, like very high, mystical. People on very high spiritual levels. No, yes, there are very high levels of Dvekas. But to be Davik and Elikus in this context, what he means is, I'm not in the money-making business. I'm in the operating the world according to the way God wants the world to run business. That's the business I'm in. I'm not in the, I'm not that's what I'm connected. That's what I'm busy with. That's what I'm involved with. And therefore, I'm very careful in mitzvahs. I say mitzvahs. Let's just say to do the positive commands and to be careful with the negative commands. U'luspalik the boy and to daven properly, v'lasik potato, and to be engaged in Torah study. Each person according to his level where he's at, the level of learning that he's shaykh to. B'shalom yirba, what that his obligations allow, based on time and level, but b'shalom yirba avaya v'terasu avidosis baruch hu, and he will be whole in his relationship with the Eibishter and in his Torah and in the service of the Eibishter. That's how, this is what it all comes down to, the Yichud of Havaya and Elikim, and that's the first cause of everything else. If there's, God forbid, a pira, the separation between Havaya and Elikim, that's the first source of all the other things that start going wrong in how you relate to your business, how you relate to the physical and material things of this world, and how you relate to your learning, davening, mitzvahs, and so on. All of that is going to be affected by, take it all the way back to the first cause, is the Adat Hayem Kavayu Elikim. That's really, if you have that consciousness, then everything else is totally different than if you're starting with, okay, yeah, I believe in God, I believe this and that, and I know He could do whatever He wants, and I know He could that. And I know He's great, and He's awesome, and He's wonderful, and He's powerful, and He's everything. But got to be realistic. You got to deal with real life. Once you have there's a room for a separation there. Even if it starts in the most subtle form, and that there's God as He's above the world, and then there's God as I'm dealing with the God that's like running the world. So that's different. It's not. Once you make that little difference, that's where everything. So in Chassidus, the main challenge revolves around Achdus Hashem. It always comes back to Achdus Hashem. So he says, Al Pian Al Yovan. Now this is the concluding piece of the Maimah. Al Pian Al Yovan Ashkosav Der Hafloga. Based on this, we understood what it's written about. Der Hafloga. The Bali Adiklik have a big, I mentioned it before, Haplega, Hapaloga, everybody has their own. But the way Jews have been saying it is their Hafloga. So, so, as it says, V'nasalanu Shem, Torah really described to us what they did wrong. It's not very unclear from the story why these guys were so terrible. And so it says, V'nasalanu Shem, we will make for us a shame. Chazal say, this is the clue that the Torah is telling us. They wanted to make a shame. Oh, a shame. A shame means avodah zarah. That as we explained earlier, the word pilug means to split. That's what they wanted, was to split the Shem Elikim from the Shem Havaya, and say, listen, we don't want to deal with the big guy. We want to deal with whatever, the one that's going to send us whatever we want or whatever we need. And therefore, they consider the means and the intermediaries the main thing. That is Avodah Zarah, etc., as mentioned previously. So he says, "V'hine b'shivot Mitzrayim tiknu asachet shalaf in the enslavement in Egypt, they rectified that sin. Zoshin inyan shavdu abayis perech b'chaymer ubelveinu. That's the that they did backbreaking work with mortar and bricks. That was to rectify the sin of what it says about that generation that built the tower, that it was to them, the brick was like a stone. As explained elsewhere, the subject at length, what's the connection between a brick, which is man-made, and considering the brick like a stone, which is something made from heaven. The idea was that they could force God's hand. Very briefly, the idea was that you could do things to force God's hand, and that had to be corrected, and that was through the work b'chaymer b'beina, by the Shivut Mitzrayim. But through this enslavement of Mitzrayim, what did they see? They saw b'Yetzias Mitzrayim Shavai v'Elikim Kulachat. This led to Yetzias Mitzrayim, where they got to see firsthand that Havai and Elikim Kulachat. After they did that to rectify the negative, now they had to see the positive. How did they see it? That's the signs and wonders in Mitzrayim, with the 10 plagues and the splitting of the sea. Shenisgala Lamata was revealed down below. The revelation of signs and miracles, wonders that went out of the ways of nature, that was beyond nature. They saw the revelation of godliness, how it's completely above nature, literally. But if the name Elikim was truly covered up, the name Yud Kei Vav Kei, on the name Yud Kei Vav Kei, how could you have, within a system that's within an operating system that runs separately from the creative source, how could you have the creator be revealed within his infinite creative power down below in the finite created system? It's only because the finite created system is also only just a packaging of the infinite creative power. It's not really a thing unto itself. That's because otherwise, if it really covered it up, then covered up, it can't come through because it's the cover up is real. Zosham Razal, this is what our sages said. The Gemara Sanhedrin Daf Lamed Tesam at Aleph. In Sanhedrin, page 39a, Amalei Ahumina La'amenu Mipalgach Le'elu Dehormiz Mipalgach L'Sata Dehormin Ayin Taisus Sham. So he's going to explain this based. He brings the Girsa of Taisvus, and he's going to follow the explanation of Taisus. Rashi has a different Girsa, and he explains it very differently, almost the opposite. That an apostate, a non-believer, said to Amema that your top half belongs to God, and this is the Taisus. Your top half belongs to God, and your bottom half belongs to the Shadim. So the Rebbe explains what does that mean. What he wanted to say is that there are two Shtei Rishuyos Chas v'Shalom. There's the forces of good and the forces of evil. There's your higher half is is connected to spirituality, to godliness, and your lower half is connected to the world and has to. And that's the idea that they believe that Hashem abandoned the world in the hands of these heavenly forces, the stars and the constellations. It says that the Goyim say that the Hashem, His honor, His glory is above the heavens, is upon the heavens. But when you go down below, yeah, there's God, up there, up in the highest spiritual realms, yeah, there's God is running the show. But down below, the sources of Ashpa, to them, what these heavenly forces, that they, God forbid, cover up godliness. This was the mistaken, false understanding of this non-believer. So it says that if that's the case, how does Herman allow Hermes to literally what he was telling him was everything that you take in through your mouth comes out the waste on the other end. So he's saying, oh, this is the higher faculties and this is the lower faculties. There's two separate jurisdictions. So how is it that
they're partners in the same factory?
Right. So how is it that it can't be two separate jurisdictions if how is he letting him run water through his property? So he says, so if he died to Makrizevas, what he's saying to him, according to their false understanding, what he's telling him is, no, according to what he was hinting them was, according to your false belief, that these intermediaries really cover up, and God is only up there, and down here is a different system in place. So how is it that there is a revelation of godliness in the world? That's what he was telling him. Which is Mitzrayim, because when it came to Mitzrayim, they saw in real time, in real life, they saw literal revelation of godliness in this world down below. So they actually saw how the Shem Elikim is not really covering up the name of Havaya, of Yudke Vavke, Havaya Elikim Kulachad Mamash. That Havaya and Elikim is literally all one. It's just a communication strategy. It's not an actual cover-up. Similarly, by entering into Eretz Yisrael, they also were able to see more in this world, the Yichud of Havaya and Elikim. How was that? We explained earlier that the Jewish people in Chutz La'aretz are idol worshippers in purity. That's dafka in Chutz La'aretz. Why? Because in Chutz La'aretz the divine flow and light comes through the garments of Asiyah, which conceal very much from the canal, as we said before. It's Yisrael Mimshech Hashpah Yidei Levush HaYitzira. The Lochin has to Godel Sham Kolkach. There, the Hashpah comes through the Levushim of Yitzira, and therefore the concealment there is not as great. So in Chassidus, elsewhere it explains that it talks about the difference between Shabbos and Yom Tov and weekdays. So it says that Shabbos, we have a sense like we're involved with physical things, eating, this, but there's a sense it's like, it's just like me and God, like there's nothing else here. Yeah, this is how we do it, but it's not like there's something else here, doesn't feel like there's anything in between. But it says Yom Tov, it is celebratory, where we do eat and drink and celebrate, but it's not like in the everyday weekday feeling where it literally feels like, I have to produce this, I have to make this, I have to, and you could really lose sight of the fact that it's coming to you from Hashem. But in Yom Tov, it's kind of like somewhere like in between, like what he's describing here, the way it is in Eretz Yisrael. Yeah, I still have to do things, and that's what Yom Tov you are involved in food preparation. I still have to do things. It's not like all done, and now I'm just showing up. It's like everything's coming ready. Here, I have to still do something, but at the same time, I'm very much aware that it's all the celebration of the Yom Tov, the connection with Hashem. That's the relationship with the food is, even though I'm putting in some effort, but it's all about the relationship. It's not about the food or the process. So he says that's what it's like in Eretz Yisrael. It's known it's just like there is Eretz Yisrael in Gashmius. There is also an Eretz Yisrael, a spiritual Eretz Yisrael. So how do you get yourself into a spiritual Eretz Yisrael? That is, Maisa Mitzvahs is the spiritual Eretz Yisrael. You have to do something. You're doing a physical action in the physical world, and yet, what's your sense? Yeah, I'm doing it. I'm really taking this esrog, and I'm nailing this one. I'm a real esrog picker-upper. That's how you feel. I'm doing a mitzvah. Even though you're doing something, you're doing, but you don't feel that it's not about you and what you're doing and how good you're doing it and how it's about you're engaged in a physical activity, and yet you sense this is about your connection with Elikos, with the Eivusha. So, but the Eretz is Lashon Ratzon. Eretz is a Lashon of Ratzon. That's what what's the connection with Mitzvah and Eretz Yisrael? Because Eretz is Lashon Ratzon. K'mayim Razal Loman Nikra Shema Eretz Shiratzon Solas Yitzin Kainuchel. As the sages of Chaz said, why is this the earth called the Hebrew word Eretz? Shiratzon. That there's two different explanations. It means that it desired or it ran, but to do the will of its maker. So to be in Eretz Yisrael means to do it because this is what, accept the yoke of heaven, I'm doing this because this is what you want. When I'm doing something because this is what you want, then it's much easier to sense that even though I'm doing it, but it's about you. It's not about it. When I'm doing it because I want to do it, even though it could officially be about you, but I could end up being about me and my doing it. So I could go to work to provide for my family. I'm going to work for myself. I'm going to work to provide for my family, and yet it's very easy because I want it. I like my job. I like what I'm doing. My career. I have a career. Whatever it is that I get excited about the work, and so even though it's officially for them, it really ends up becoming about the work, and you can forget about them. Like the phone rings, it's like bug off. I'm at work. Leave it. Oh, but I only work for you, right? It's not really the case. So the same, but when it comes to a mitzvah, and it's really, I'm not doing this for me at all. I'm just doing it for you. So even though I'm doing something with a physical object in the physical world, and I'm involved with physical doing, and yet I don't lose sight of who it's for. So that way, by doing the mitzvahs with Kabbalah and Malchus Shemayim, they give a mitzvah with Kabbalah and Malchus Shemayim, Yavei la Yediyah Davai V'Lekim Kulachan. That's how a person comes to the knowledge of Havaya and Elikim Kulachat, because even though he said earlier that one of the ways you come to this through Nisyanis, but okay, the Nisayan is as we explained earlier, the Nisayan serves as a breakthrough to a new level of realization that you couldn't get to through the gradual step-by-step process. Okay, fine. So you had an epiphany, you had an awakening, you had a realization, but you know what happens? It fades away. Okay, you did the Nisayim, you went through, and then you get busy with everyday life. The Nisayim passes, you move on, you get busy with everyday life, and she says that what's the everyday way to hold on to the realization, to hold on to that knowledge, to get that knowledge, and to internalize that knowledge? That's Rukim HaMitzvah Kabbalas El Malchus Shemayim. So yes, I do physical things with physical objects, and really it's not about the thing, and it's not about the object, and it's about the Eivish's will, and that way I can also go into business and do the exact same thing. I pick up a loan because Hashem said so. I can also crack open a cash register because Hashem said so. And that's how I could have lived that way when I have the Eretz Yisrael Baruchnis. That's why he prefaced the story of mentioning Yitzias Mitzrayim. Moshe Rabbeinu gives this whole speech. He mentions Yitzias Mitzrayim, and Knesset Eretz, he mentions that they're going to go into Eretz Yisrael. Before he drops the pasuk of Yadata Hayom on them, what's the connection? The three Yitzias Mitzrayim and entering into Eretz Yisrael, you come to the knowledge of Havayu Elikim. Hainu liyachad Havayu Elikim, Eish Havayu Elikim kulachad mamash. That is to unify Havaya, to make the yichud of Havaya and Elikim, to realize, to have the knowledge and awareness and consciousness that Havaya and Elikim kulachad mamash. So it's interesting that he did not explain Yitzias Mitzrayim and Ruchnius. He mentioned Yitzias Mitzrayim and Knesset Eretz. He explained Yitzias Mitzrayim what it was like for them, what they saw, but he doesn't explain, okay, what does that have to do with us? So the question is, why not? So there's one of two possible explanations why he doesn't say it. Either he's, well, I said before that the real way you get through is through Nisyanis. And the way you get through a Nisayan is, well, how does a Nisayan work? A Nisayan works like something that you see that if, according to the rules of nature, I have no way of getting out of here. And there's no way I can pull this off. And if you do it, so what happens is you see how you were able to do the right thing and come out at the other end of the Nisayan in good shape after, so you saw it, what they saw in Yitzias Mitzrayim. You had your personal Yitzias Mitzrayim. You went through the Nisayan, and so he's telling you that really that this idea of the Knesset Eretz Yisrael, that to come to the idea, that's the two things. He already explained the Inyan of Nisayanus, the Inyan of that. So that's your Yitzias Mitzrayim. That's how you come to it. Now he just really had to add the Knesset Eretz, what that means in your everyday life. You're not waiting, you're not going from the Nisayan to Nisayan. You certainly don't want to be waiting around for the next Nisayan. Like this, now in your everyday life, it's through going into Eretz Yisrael. After you get past through the Nisayan, now it's to make the focus on doing the mitzvahs b'Kabbalas Emal Shemayim. Another. Sometimes there's just a rule that they don't always explain everything in each place, and they rely on what it says in other places. So there are many different. Mostly we're familiar with Yitzias Mitzrayim and Ruchnius in terms of going out of your limitations. But in this context, there is, of seeing the above nature in nature. So it could also mean elsewhere the way it's explained is the lesson from the miracles of Yitzias Mitzrayim. Okay, what does it have to do with us? And the answer is that we all know stories. Many of us have had stories in our own lives, and we know stories of people. We all know and hear and see stories of people in situations where, according to the rules of nature, there was no way out. They would not. And yet, somehow, and especially we have miracle stories. This one has with the oil, and that one has with the Gris Kodesh, and that one has with the. So yeah, we hear stories, and now in the from world you have Emunah stories, and we hear stories. We have all kinds of stories, and a lot of the stories, the theme is that the person is in a matzav that there's no way out, and something miraculous happens, and you know, it works out, and something happens, and it's interesting that the Rebbe said in the Sikha, and the last book, one of the things the Rebbe said in the Sikha, a few different places the Rebbe spoke about, you know, how any delay in Mashiach coming doesn't make any sense, and but there was one time when the Rebbe said that if there is a delay, it's only that just like in Yetzias Mitzrayim, Hashem said to Moshe, I still need to stick around for a while, and I need you to go to Paro, I need to send a few more plagues. Why? He's ready, we just break him and let's go. Leman reverse ma'ifsai be'eretz Mitzrayim. Hashem says, I want to increase my signs and wonders in Eretz Mitzrayim. So the Rebbe said that similarly now an hour goes, if there's any reason like for us to stay, it's only for Leman reverse ma'ifsai be'eretz Mitzrayim. The Rebbe says so much so that a person will meet another person and say, "No, what's the latest ma'ifas?" And he'll answer, "What's the latest ma'ifas?" There's so many happenings. Like that's what the Rebbe says in the Sikha very interestingly to describe our time when we're like sort of in the delay time for Mashiach to come. So what's okay? Very nice. What's like the avodah ruchniya stuff? You know, what is that in avodah? In avodah is that's supposed to help you see. So what happens is most people hear a story like that. Okay, it's inspiring, and then so you just use it for inspiration, but the inspiration fades very fast. Chassidus says, "V'yadaita, stop and think. What is that story telling you? That story is telling you that. Analyze it. Look into it. What is it? The rules of nature said this. Not just telling you that there's a great God who could do whatever he wants, whenever he wants. It's telling you something about the very nature of nature. That nature itself is not a real concealment, because if nature itself was a real concealment, so you can't break the concealment, you can't break the bracket. You can't, you can't have a gas tank and sometimes you crack it open and sometimes if it's a real container, it's a real separate thing, it's a real. You can't open and close it whenever you want. It's a real God. So the fact that this deeper understanding, realization that nature itself is not a cover-up, that itself is really a part of the Geula process. That when you realize that the nature itself is the way that everybody, that the world itself is ready for Geula. The world itself, nature itself, is not. Don't see the cover-up. See the process of peeling away the cover-up. So this is but obviously the main thing is that there should be not so much focus on what's going on in the world. The Knesset La'aretz, the main thing is the Knesset La'aretz, that you get it, that to see the connection, to see the reality in the context of Torah, Mitzvahs, Avodas Hashem. The main thing, Yetzias Mitzrayim is very nice, but you now you have to go somewhere. It's Yetzias Mitzrayim was in order to go to Mount Torah and Eretz Yisrael. That's where it was you going to. Still, you have to go to Eretz Yisrael. That this should be that in your avodah, Torah, Mitzvahs, and we should actually be zeicha to go into Eretz Yisrael and with the Beis Hamikdash together with Mashiach Tzidkenu very soon.
Amen. That's tough.